All right, so we have our next segment pulled up, and this is Supreme Court paves way for mass Trump layoffs of federal workers. Yeah, so y'all thought I was going to be leaving y'all hanging with reaction content. No, we got something here. Now, I generally stay out of politics, but I'm reacting to this for a few different reasons, and I'm going to be reacting to it in not just a stereotypical way that a lot of people react to, just giving casual commentary. I'm going to be reacting to this and giving advice based on what is this going to have, what's the effect this is going to have on people who are doing some kind of side hustle or full time in terms of it saturating the market or taking away opportunities. So, yes, these layoffs could be coming, but what is that going to do and how's that going to affect you? I don't really care about the politics of it, the MAGA stuff, the Democrats. We're not going to talk about that because I don't really want to talk politics in this channel, on this channel rather. But I do want to acknowledge the fact that this is going to affect y'all because if a bunch of people start hitting the streets that are laid off, it will affect, I'll say, four categories. If you're watching the Side Hustler Society, you're mainly probably watching for one of four reasons. You want to make some extra money or full time via some kind of app. You want to get involved with the Airbnb or real estate game. You want to build a one person business or a freelancer business, or you're an aspiring content creator and you would like to be a YouTuber or make money online via social media in some form or fashion, either now, in the future, as a form of passive or side hustle income, if you will, or maybe even full time. This can affect all four. So we're going to hear what the news, CBS News that is, has to say, and this will be linked in the description. Of course, don't forget to like the video on your way in. Really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe if you're new, and be sure to check out the Self-Made Business Academy if you're looking at doing anything that I just mentioned as far as those four categories full time. Let's go ahead and dive into it.
The Supreme Court has cleared the way for the Trump administration to move forward with its mass layoffs of federal workers. The justices today lifted a lower court order that had blocked layoffs at dozens of agencies. The Trump administration has been working to reorganize and downsize the federal government under the White House Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE. CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson joins us now. Jessica, always very good to see you. Remind us a little bit about the facts of this case and how it ended up before the Supreme Court here.
So it ended up before the Supreme Court, as we're talking about increasingly frequently, is that there was an emergency appeal to the Supreme Court. So what happened? As you said, President Trump issued an executive order saying, essentially, we're going to drastically reduce the number of federal workers. And then there was another memo that was issued about exactly how to do that. Labor groups and others sued and said, Mr. President, you don't have the power. You actually have to work with Congress if you want to dramatically reorganize the executive branch this way.
Okay, real quick, I'm going to have to pause it, even though I'm going to give most of my commentary after the video because of what I said. Got to pause it for fair use purposes, but I do want to chime in here real quick. They've been given the people who could be potentially getting laid off, federal workers, they've been given a heads up by Trump for quite some time. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be fighting to keep their jobs. By all means, they should. But I would just hope they have some kind of backup plan in case this actually happens. I have no way of knowing if they do or don't. I just hope they do because I would just sleep better at night if that was me.
And there was an initial...
And by backup plan, I mean, i.e., at least have a side hustle.
Win by those challenging the president's executive order in the trial court at the district court. The district court judge said, at least for now, to the challengers, you're right, Mr. President, you cannot implement these plans. Let's put these plans on hold. The Trump administration then appealed up to the Ninth Circuit, that's the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and said, let us move forward. The Ninth Circuit, in a divided decision, said no. The Trump administration, in an emergency appeal, then went up to the Supreme Court. That's the ruling that we're talking about today. And the Supreme Court essentially lifted the lower court's pause, meaning that the restructuring can move forward while this case plays out.
So what does that mean exactly about what kind of federal workers will...
So that means that before this case even reaches its conclusion, layoffs can start happening. Yikes.
Be affected by this? And do we have a sense of how soon that would happen?
So we're talking about federal workers from 12 different agencies. So we're talking about potentially, my understanding is not just tens of thousands of workers, but actually up to 100,000 different workers. This would be a significant restructuring of the executive branch. And again, the underlying question is whether or not the president has the power to do that without working with Congress. The president tried to do this during the first administration by working with Congress. Congress wasn't willing to do that, and therefore now the president is trying to do this by himself. How quickly could this happen? I would say that we're potentially talking about days or weeks to see some significant changes in the executive branch.
That is not much time at all. Jessica, did the justices give any kind of indication of why they went the way they did?
No, as is typical for an order like this when the justices are responding to an emergency appeal. There wasn't a vote count. There wasn't an opinion. There was a dissent from Justice Jackson, but this is known as the shadow docket or the emergency docket. When it comes to cases that are on the main docket, that's when we get those lengthy opinions that we get to talk about with the concurrences and the dissent. This was just a quick order of we're lifting that stay, go ahead, and the Trump administration can move forward with their plans again while the case plays out.
And Jessica, I know that you had mentioned that action could be taken on this really in just a matter of days or weeks. Is there anything else that we should be looking out for when it comes to the legality of this case?
So this is a big test for how much the president can do on his own. We should be clear that in this case, we are talking about the president restructuring the executive branch. And historically, presidents have had significant power because they are the chief executive over the executive branch. But the question is whether or not the restructuring is so significant, is so vast, that this is an area where you would need the cooperation of both political branches. So this really, as I said, is a test of how much can the president do on his own when it comes to the executive branch.
Just
Okay, that's a good place to stop it. We only have 6 seconds left anyway. So if y'all want to check this video out, the link will be in the description. So let's go ahead and get into a what-if scenario, or it kind of sounds inevitable, but let's go ahead and say that these layoffs are going to happen, which it looks like they probably will in some form. The magnitude of it, we don't know. But when these layoffs happen, how are they going to affect those 4 areas that y'all are basically coming to me for advice for in terms of like side hustles? So we're going to start with the one that's going to be the least affected, and we'll end with the one that's probably going to be the most affected. Least affected would be the content creator or the YouTuber. So layoffs happen. All these federal workers are quote unquote on the streets, jobless. Will a lot of them starting YouTube channels or trying to be a content creator? I don't necessarily see it because I just don't really see it. There's no like direct correlation of seeing like a bunch of federal workers necessarily going into content creation. And let's say if all of them did, it wouldn't really make an impact on you pursuing a income stream as a YouTuber or as an online business or as a content creator. Wouldn't really impact you. So that's the category that's going to be the least affected. Moving on from that, the next one would be the real estate / Airbnb. A bunch of federal workers getting laid off. How would that affect the real estate industry? Generally speaking, it won't affect it that much because if they're already involved in real estate, which I actually could believe a number of federal workers would be involved in real estate, they probably already are. They already probably have a side hustle or some rental properties on the side while they're at their federal job. And if they get laid off, that might become their full-time thing. They might start acquiring more properties, might start renting more properties out, maybe in order to make up for that cash flow, they'll start doing rental arbitrage more and hunting for those type of deals. So you might see a slight increase in the market in that regards, but that will be very locally based. It wouldn't be something on a national level. Moving on from that, so those 2 categories are more or less kind of safe. These next 2 will be affected more. This category is going to be the freelancer or the one-person business. Now, these federal workers, if a number of them are tradesmen or tradeswomen, then they may just decide, hey, it's time to go ahead and go into this thing full time, whether it be graphic design, video editing, like these different freelancing services. If they have those skill sets, they could hit the market. So that means they could get on these apps or websites like Fiverr and Upwork and start attempting to offer their services, and it would further saturate the market. Now, I've told y'all several times, don't rely on those platforms because as far as I'm concerned, they're already saturated, so saturated, and not necessarily with quality either. And a lot of cheap customers are looking to get stuff for cheap on those platforms. So I just say never rely on them. But if you're following the advice on this channel, which I highly advise that you set your own means of getting leads. In fact, the whole theme of this season of the Side Hustle Society podcast is lead generation, both online and offline. Regardless of how many federal workers hit the streets with a particular trade or skill, it won't make that much of an impact. And that's assuming they have a trade or skill to start with. These are people that are the definition of just a standard employee most of the time. I do see a lot of them having a real estate portfolio, but as far as a trade or skill that you can bring to the marketplace for money, it's not going to affect that much. But I'm going to tell you this, the category that's going to be the most affected about this is people on the apps, the gig apps, like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, that stuff. Now, why do I say that confidently so? Because it happened the first time Trump did something like this. Y'all remember in his first term when Trump shut down the government for like 3 weeks? The demand plummeted. I mean, we're talking about like a 60% reduction in the amount of requests that I saw coming in on a regular basis during the peak times. So whatever the rideshare times are, it just wouldn't be hardly any activity. And the pretty high activity times for food delivery, like lunchtime between 11 and 2 or dinner time between 5 and 9 p.m., like they just were not busy. You really had to hunt to find areas of activity. And it got so bad that I was making content at the time, and I made a video on why is it so slow. And there are various reasons why it was slow, because it was during the normal yearly slowdown in January, but the government being shut down added on top of that. Now, you might be wondering why. Does that mean like the federal workers aren't ordering Uber Eats? They're trying to save on a budget or something? That's partially true, but the bigger one is, where do you think they're going to go the moment they don't have any income? They got on these apps. These cats got on Uber and DoorDash, so the driver supply was overinflated, and there wasn't enough orders to go out to accommodate everyone. You think if these layoffs happen, that's not going to happen again? In fact, last time it was only temporary. Now, at the time, we didn't know how long the government was going to be shut down. It could have been like longer, but Trump caved in after about 3 weeks. So everyone went back to work after that. But at least they knew they would be going back. They didn't know when, but they knew they were going back. Getting laid off means, hey, we're letting you go for this reason, and you're not coming back. So you best believe their first instinct, especially if they don't have a trader skill like we covered, is going to be getting on these apps, and the same thing is going to happen again. So if you're on these apps and you're doing it full time, or even if you're doing it part time, I would be really trying to develop that trader skill, which I sound like a broken record, and move into the freelancer category, because the moment they get on these apps, it's going to be oversaturated, and however much money you are making per day, you're going to have to increase the amount of hours to hit that amount, or you might just have to accept the less money because it won't matter how many hours you're online. There's just too many drivers, and this goes for both rideshare and food delivery. So get ahead of the curve and start looking for alternative ways of making money, because this layoff, I see it being more likely to happen than not, because in general, and I'm not even talking about Trump, I'm just talking about government jobs in general. We've had way too many government jobs than necessary, and we have never really, at least in the past few years, in my opinion, we haven't really needed those jobs. A lot of these employees are just kind of sitting on their jobs doing like menial, like regular, like tasks that eventually will be outsourced to AI. But aside from that, it's just too many jobs. Even the legitimate jobs have too many people that are doing them. So it's not enough work to go around. So they're usually just kind of hanging around, just kind of kicking it. Not like literally, but there's not enough work to go around to justify so many jobs. So this was going to have to happen eventually. Trump, being the person he is just accelerating the process. So we need to make sure that we're prepared. In particular, people who are on the apps.